The planet Arendar was not a kind place. Its skies were always gray, its winds harsh and biting, and its surface covered in jagged rocks and endless stretches of barren land. Few people chose to live here, but those who did had no other choice. They were settlers, miners, or refugees from Earth, trying to scrape together a life on this unforgiving world. It was quiet most days, the silence broken only by the howl of the wind or the distant growl of predators stalking the prairie wasteland. That silence shattered one morning when a streak of fire tore across the sky. Object a small spacecraft blazed through the atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris as it plummeted toward the ground. The crash was deafening, shaking the earth and sending plumes of dust high into the air. By the time the dust settled, a crater had formed in the middle of the desert, and inside it lay the remains of the ship. Twisted metal jutted out at odd angles, sparks flickered weakly, and smoke curled upward like ghostly fingers dotted first. No one came near. The settlers whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with fear. What could have caused such a thing? Was it an attack? A malfunction? Or something worse? No human ships were scheduled to arrive, which meant this visitor wasn't from Earth. Or maybe not even human at all. It didn't take long for word to spread. Within hours, Captain Ryan Holt arrived with a team of armed guards. He was a tall man with sharp features and cold eyes, known for his strict adherence to rules and his lack of patience for anything that disrupted order. His boots crunched against the rocky ground as he approached the wreckage, scanning the area carefully. "Search the perimeter," he ordered, his voice firm. "If there's anyone alive, bring them to me." His men obeyed without question, fanning out around the crash site. One of them called out moments later, "Captain, over here." Ryan moved quickly, his rifle slung over his shoulder as he stepped closer. There, lying partially buried under rubble, was a figure unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was small, frail, and clearly injured. Its skin shimmered faintly, almost like liquid metal, and its large, almond-shaped eyes blinked weakly as it tried to focus on its surroundings. It wasn't human. "What is that?" one of the guards muttered, taking a step back. Ryan frowned, studying the creature closely. It looked young, perhaps a child, and utterly helpless. Blood seeped from cuts on its arms and legs, and its breathing was shallow. Despite its strange appearance, it seemed fragile, vulnerable even. Still, Ryan couldn't shake the unease settling in his chest. This was uncharted territory, an alien. On Arendar, alive. News of the discovery spread fast. Before long, a crowd gathered at the edge of the crater, murmuring nervously. Some were curious, others frightened. A few shouted angrily, demanding answers. "What if it's dangerous?" One man yelled. "We don't know what it wants." "It's hurt," a woman countered, her voice softer. "Look at it, it's just a kid." "Kid or not, it's not one of us," another man snapped. "It doesn't belong here." Captain Holt raised a hand, silencing the growing argument. "Enough," he said firmly. "We'll handle this situation according to protocol." 4. Now, the alien stays contained until we determine whether it poses a threat. But not everyone agreed with his decision. Two figures pushed their way through the crowd, stepping forward to get a better look. The first was Lila Monroe, a medic who worked at the settlement's clinic. She was in her early 30s, with short brown hair and a determined expression. The second was Ethan Cole, a scavenger known for his rough demeanor and questionable morals. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face lined with scars from years spent surviving in the wild. Lila knelt beside the alien, ignoring the protests of the guards. "She's hurt," she said, her tone calm but insistent. "Let me help her." "She's not our problem," Ryan replied sharply. "We don't know what it is or where it came from." "She's a child," Lila shot back, her voice rising. "Doesn't that matter?" Ethan crossed his arms, watching the exchange with a smirk. "You're wasting your breath, Doc. These folks aren't exactly known for their compassion." He glanced down at the alien, his expression unreadable. Still, leaving her here to die seems like a bad move. Who knows what secret she might be carrying? Ryan scowled. Stay out of this, Cole. This isn't up for debate. But Leela refused to back down. If we leave her here, we're no better than animals. Is that what you want, Captain? To let fear dictate our actions? Her words struck a nerve, and the crowd began to murmur again. Some nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads, muttering about risks and consequences. Ryan hesitated, torn between duty and uncertainty. Finally, he sighed. Fine. Take her to the clinic. But keep her under guard at all times. And if she so much as twitches wrong, you'll answer for it. Lila nodded, relief washing over her face. With Ethan's reluctant help, she carefully lifted the alien onto a stretcher and carried her away from the crash site. As they walked, the alien stirred slightly, letting out a soft sound that was neither a cry nor a moan. It was impossible to tell what it meant, but Lila felt a pang of sympathy nonetheless. Back at the clinic, Lila tended to the alien's wounds as best she could. She cleaned the cuts, applied bandages, and monitored her vitals. The alien's body temperature was lower than a human's, and her pulse was slow and steady, almost hypnotic. Her shimmering skin reflected the dim light of the room, giving her an otherworldly glow. Ethan leaned against the wall, watching silently. You really think this is worth it? He asked after a while. Helping some random alien kid. You? Don't even know what she is. I don't need to know what she is, Lila replied, her voice steady. I just know she needs help. Isn't that enough? Ethan shrugged, unconvinced. Maybe. Or maybe you're setting yourself up for trouble. Either way, don't say I didn't warn you. As the hours passed, the alien drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time she woke, her wide, luminous eyes darted around the room, searching for something or someone. Lila stayed by her side, speaking softly in hopes of calming her. Though the alien couldn't understand her words, Lila hoped her tone would convey kindness. Outside, the settlers continued to argue. Fear and mistrust hung heavy in the air, dividing the community. Some believed helping the alien was the right thing to do, while others saw it as reckless and dangerous. Captain Holt struggled to maintain control, issuing orders and warnings to keep the peace. And yet, amidst the chaos, one thing remained clear. The alien girl had already changed everything. Whether for better or worse, only time would tell. The days that followed were tense. The alien girl, whom Lila had started calling Lyra, though she wasn't sure if the name meant anything to her, remained in the clinic under constant supervision. Captain Ryan Holt posted guards outside the building, and rumors spread like wildfire through the settlement. Some people whispered that Lyra was dangerous, a spy sent by an unknown enemy. Others believed she was just a child, lost and alone, deserving of compassion. But no matter what anyone said, fear lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. Lila spent most of her time with Lyra, trying to make her comfortable. She brought blankets to keep her warm, though Lyra's body temperature seemed naturally cooler than a human's. She offered food and water, but Lyra refused everything. It was as if she didn't need or couldn't process what Lila provided. Still, Lila stayed by her side, speaking softly and smiling whenever Lyra's wide eyes met hers. There was something about the alien girl that made Lila feel protective, almost maternal. She couldn't explain it, but she knew she wouldn't abandon her. Ethan, on the other hand, wasn't so sentimental. He visited the clinic occasionally, leaning against the doorway with his arms crossed, watching silently. "You're wasting your time," he said one evening as Lila adjusted a blanket around Lyra. "She doesn't understand you. She probably doesn't even care." "That's not true," Lila replied without looking up. "She responds when I talk to her. Haven't you noticed?" "Sure, maybe she blinks or whatever." "Big deal. What are you going to do? Teach her English?" "She's not staying here forever, Doc. Once Hope figures out what to do with her, she's gone." Lila frowned, her hands pausing mid-motion. And what do you think he'll do with her? Ethan shrugged. Depends. If she's useful, they'll take her apart piece by piece to see how she works. If she's not, they'll get rid of her. Either way, she's not sticking around. The thought sent a chill down Lila's spine, but she forced herself to stay calm. Then we'll have to prove she's worth keeping alive, Ethan snorted. Good luck with that. People here aren't exactly known for their generosity. Despite his harsh words, Ethan kept coming back. Sometimes he brought scraps of metal or tools he'd scavenge, claiming they might help somehow. Other times, he simply stood there, observing Lyra with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Lila wasn't sure why he bothered, but she didn't ask. She was just grateful for the extra pair of hands, even if his motives weren't entirely pure. One night, after the guards had left their posts and the clinic was quiet, Lila decided to try something new. She pulled out a small notepad and began drawing simple pictures of sun, a tree, a person. Then she pointed to each image and spoke the word slowly, hoping Lyra might catch on. At first, there was no reaction. But after several minutes, Lyra reached out hesitantly and touched the picture of the person. Her fingers lingered on the page, and her lips parted slightly, as if she were trying to say something. Encouraged, Lila smiled. Yes, that's a person. Like me. She tapped her chest lightly. Me! Lyra tilted her head, studying Lila intently. Then, to Lila's surprise, the alien girl raised a trembling hand and placed it over her own chest. Me! She whispered, her voice soft and unfamiliar. Lila froze, her heart racing. Did you just... Before she could finish, Lyra closed her eyes and slumped back onto the bed, exhausted. Lila stared at her, her mind spinning. Had Lyra really tried to repeat the word? Was it possible she could learn? Ethan returned the next morning to find Lila pacing excitedly. You're not going to believe this, she said, barely able to contain her enthusiasm. She said me, or at least she tried to. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? You didn't imagine it? No, I'm positive. She repeated the word after me. It's a start, Ethan. A real start. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue either. Instead, he glanced at Lyra, who was sleeping peacefully. Even if she can learn, it doesn't change anything. People out there still think she's dangerous. They're wrong. Lila insisted. She's just a child. Can't they see that? Doesn't matter what they see, Ethan replied bitterly. Fear makes people stupid. They'll do whatever it takes to feel safe, even if it means throwing her to the wolves. His words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. Lila wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but deep down she knew he was right. Fear had already taken hold of the settlement, twisting reason into paranoia. If they didn't act soon, Lyra's fate would be sealed. Later that day, Captain Holt arrived with 2 armed guards. His expression was grim as he entered the clinic, his boots clicking sharply against the floor. We've made a decision, he announced, his voice cold and authoritative. The alien is to be relocated to a secure facility for further study. You're to prepare her immediately. Lila stepped forward, her heart pounding. Captain, please. She's still recovering. Moving her now could put her in danger. That's not your concern, Holt snapped. Orders are orders. We can't risk keeping her here any longer. But she's harmless, Lila protested. She's just a child. She's not human, Holt shot back. And until we know more, she's a potential threat. End of discussion. Ethan watched silently from the corner, his jaw tightening. When Holt turned to leave, Ethan caught Lila's eye and gave a slight nod toward the window. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Lila understood. As soon as Holt and his men were gone, Ethan moved quickly, gathering supplies into a makeshift bag. What are you doing? Lila asked, her voice low. We're getting her out of here, Ethan replied. Tonight. But no buts, he interrupted. If we don't move now, they'll take her away, and we'll never see her again. Is that what you want? Lila hesitated, torn between fear and determination. Finally, she shook her head. No, it's not. Together, they work quickly, wrapping Lyra in blankets to keep her warm and carrying her carefully out of the clinic through a side door. The night was dark and cold, the wind whipping across the desert like a living thing. Ethan led the way, guiding them toward an abandoned bunker on the outskirts of the settlement. It wasn't much, but it would provide shelter and a chance. To her group dot as they walked, Lyra stirred faintly in Lila's arms. Her luminous eyes opened briefly, locking onto Lila's face. For a moment, Lila felt a surge of guilt. Was she doing the right thing? Could she really protect Lyra on her own? But then Lyra reached up weakly, her small hand brushing against Lila's cheek, and in that moment, all doubt melted away. Whatever happened next, Lila knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't let anyone hurt this child. The bunker was cold and damp, its walls lined with rusted metal panels that groaned softly in the wind. It wasn't much of a hiding place, just an old storage unit left behind by miners who had long since abandoned this part of the desert, but it would have to do. Ethan set down the supplies he brought while Lila gently laid Lyra on a pile of blankets they'd scavenged from the clinic. The alien girl blinked slowly, her shimmering skin reflecting the dim light of a battery-powered lantern. All right, Ethan said, brushing dust off his hands. This buys us some time, but not much. Once Hope realizes she's gone, he'll tear this settlement apart looking for her. Lila knelt beside Lyra, checking her bandages and making sure she was comfortable. Then we need to figure out what to do next. We can't stay here forever. Ethan leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. You're the one who wanted to play hero, Doc. What's your plan? Lila hesitated. She didn't have a plan, not really. All she knew was that she couldn't let Lyra be taken away, locked up, or worse. But how could two people protect an alien child from an entire settlement? The odds were stacked against them. Before she could respond, Lyra stirred. Her large, luminous eyes fixed on Lila, and she reached out weakly, her fingers brushing against Lila's arm. Lila smiled softly, taking her hand. It's okay, she murmured. We're going to keep you safe. Ethan watched the exchange with a skeptical expression. She doesn't understand you, does she? She understands more than you think, Lila replied firmly. Then turning back to Lyra, she pointed to herself. Me, she said clearly. Layla tilted her head, studying her face. After a moment, she repeated the word in her soft, melodic voice. La. Lila's heart skipped a beat. Yes, that's right, Lila. Encouraged, Lila continued, pointing to Ethan next. This is Ethan. Lyra turned her gaze to him, her expression curious but cautious. She hesitated before speaking. Then Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Guess she's smarter than she looks. Lila ignored his comment, focusing instead on building a connection with Lyra. Over the next few hours, she used simple drawings and gestures to teach her basic words like food, water, and safe. Lyra struggled at first, her attempt clumsy and uncertain, but she seemed eager to learn. Each small victory filled Lila with hope. If they could communicate, maybe they could find a way to help her and each other. But communication wasn't the only challenge. Lyra still refused to eat or drink anything Lila offered, no matter how carefully she prepared it. Her body seemed to function differently from a human's, and Lila worried about what would happen if she couldn't find a way to nourish her. Ethan suggested trying synthetic food substitutes, the kind used by settlers who couldn't afford real meals, but Lyra recoiled at the smell. It's no use, Ethan muttered one evening as they sat together in the dimly lit bunker. If she won't eat, she won't last long. She'll find a way, Lila insisted, though doubt gnawed at her. Her body must adapt somehow. She survived the crash, didn't she? Ethan shrugged, unconvinced. Surviving a crash and surviving starvation are two different things. Their argument was interrupted when Lyra suddenly sat upright, her eyes wide with alarm. She pressed a hand to her temple, wincing as if in pain. Layla rushed to her side, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" Lyra shook her head, her breathing quick and shallow. Then, without warning, images flooded Lila's mind, a blur of strange landscapes, metallic ships, and shadowy figures chasing her through endless corridors. Layla gasped, pulling back in shock. The visions faded as quickly as they had come, leaving her disoriented and trembling. "What was that?" Ethan demanded, standing up sharply. I don't know," Lila stammered. "It felt like memories, or maybe thoughts, from her." Lyra looked at Lila, her expression apologetic. She reached out tentatively, touching Lila's hand. "Sorry," she whispered. Lila shook her head, forcing herself to smile. "It's okay. You didn't mean to scare me." Over the next few days, similar episodes occurred whenever Lyra became agitated or tired. At first, the visions were fleeting and confusing, but as Lyra grew stronger, they became clearer. Through fragments of images and emotions, Lila pieced together parts of Lyra's story. She learned that Lyra's people were peaceful, valuing harmony and cooperation above all else. They had been fleeing persecution when their ship was attacked, forcing them to scatter across the galaxy. Lyra had been separated from her crew during the chaos, crashing onto Arendor alone. "She's scared," Lila told Ethan one night after another round of unsettling visions. "She thinks we'll turn her away too." Ethan frowned, staring at the ground. "Can you blame her? Everyone else already has." "That's why we have to prove her wrong," Lila said firmly. "We have to show her that not all humans are." Like that? Easier said than done. Word of Lyra's disappearance spread quickly through the settlement, fueling anger and suspicion. Captain Holt issued a public statement, accusing Ethan and Lila of harboring a dangerous fugitive. Posters went up around town, labeling them traitors and warning others to report any sightings. Some settlers believed the rumors, calling for harsh punishment. Others whispered that the so-called flesh-eating humans, a derogatory term for those who consume synthetic food due to shortages, were protecting the alien because they had no morals. The nickname stuck, becoming both a curse and a shield. Most people avoided confronting Ethan and Lila directly, afraid of retaliation from the ruthless scavengers rumored to associate with them. In truth, Ethan found the label amusing. "Guess we're officially bad guys now," he remarked one evening as they listened to distant voices arguing outside the bunker. "We're not bad guys," Lila snapped. "We're doing what's right." "Right or wrong, it doesn't matter to them," Ethan replied bitterly. "All they see is fear, and fear makes people stupid." Despite the growing hostility, life in the bunker settled into a fragile routine. Lila continued teaching Lyra new words, while Ethan scoured the desert for supplies. Slowly but surely, Lyra began to heal not just physically, but emotionally. She started smiling more often, her once timid demeanor giving way to quiet curiosity. One day, she even laughed a sound so pure and joyful that it brought tears to Lila's eyes, but their fragile peace couldn't last forever. Late one night, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the bunker. Ethan grabbed a crowbar, motioning for Lila to stay quiet. Lyra clung to Lila, her eyes wide with fear. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until finally a knock came at the heavy metal door. "Open up," a gruff voice called. "We know you're in there." The knock came again, louder this time. "Open the door." The voice outside barked. "This is Captain Holt. You're surrounded." Ethan glanced at Lila, his grip tightening on the crowbar. "Looks like they found us," he muttered under his breath. Lila's heart raced as she clutched Lyra close, shielding her with her body. The alien girl trembled, her wide eyes darting toward the door. "It's okay," Lila whispered, though her own voice wavered. "We'll figure something out." Outside, the sound of boots scraping against the rocky ground grew louder. More voices joined Holt's, and the faint hum of flashlights pierced through the cracks in the bunker walls. They were trapped outnumbered and outgunned. There was. No way. I'll at least not without a fight. Ethan took a step closer to the door, his expression grim. Listen, he said quietly, glancing back at Lila. I can try to hold them off while you take Lyra and run. There's a tunnel behind those crates over there. It leads to the surface. If you move fast, you might be able to slip past them. No, Lila said firmly, shaking her head. I'm not leaving you here. This isn't about me, Ethan. Shot back. It's about keeping her safe. You know I'm right. Before Lila could argue further, the door creaked ominously as someone tried to force it open. Ethan cursed under his breath and raised a crowbar, ready to defend their makeshift refuge. But just as the hinges began to give way, a new voice cut through the tension. Wait! Don't hurt them! Everyone froze. The voice belonged to Victor Kane, a grizzled scavenger known for his rough edges and questionable alliances. He stepped into view, flanked by a small group of armed men and women. Unlike Captain Holt's team, these people wore mismatched gear and carried weapons that looked cobbled together from scrap metal. They weren't soldiers, they were survivors. What are you doing here, Kane? Holt demanded, his tone sharp. With irritation. This doesn't concern you. Victor smirked, his weathered face splitting into a grin. Actually, it does. Word around town is you've been hunting down some poor kid who didn't do anything wrong. That kind of thing. Tends to piss people off. Holt scowled. That poor kid is an alien. We don't know what it's capable of or what it wants. She's not a threat, Lila interrupted, stepping forward despite Ethan's warning glare. She kept Lyra tucked behind her, shielding her as best she could. She's just a child. Look at her. Does she look dangerous to you? For a moment, no one spoke. All eyes turned to Lyra, who peeked out from behind Lila, her shimmering skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her large, almond-shaped eyes met theirs, filled with fear but also a quiet plea for understanding. Even Holt seemed momentarily unsure, his usual confidence faltering. Victor broke the silence with a low chuckle. See? Nothing to worry about. Just a scared kid trying to survive, same as the rest of us. That's exactly why we need to take her in, Holt insisted, regaining his composure. We don't know where she came from or what she represents. She could be carrying diseases, technology, anything. And maybe she's just looking for help, Victor countered, his tone hardening. You ever think about that? Or are you too busy playing soldier to care? The standoff grew tense, the air thick with hostility. Holt's men shifted uneasily, their weapons trained on Victor's group. For a moment, it seemed like violence was inevitable. Then Ethan stepped forward, lowering his crowbar slightly. If you want her, he said, his voice steady, you'll have to go through us. Victor raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. Brave words for someone holding a piece of metal. Ethan shrugged. It's all I've got. To everyone's surprise, Victor laughed. All right then. How about this? Instead of fighting, we work together. You let me talk to the little lady, see what she knows. Maybe she's got something worth sharing. No deals, Holt snapped. She's coming with us, Victor sighed, shaking his head. Fine, have it your way. With a quick signal, his group raised their weapons, forming a protective barrier between Holt's men and the bunker. The tension escalated, both sides waiting for the other to make the first move. But before things could spiral out of control, Lyra stepped forward. She moved slowly, her movements deliberate, and placed herself between the two groups. Her luminous eyes locked onto Holt's, and though she didn't speak, her presence commanded attention. For a brief moment, the chaos around her faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. She's saying something, Lila murmured, recognizing the subtle flicker of energy radiating from Lyra's body. It was the same feeling she'd experienced during the visions, only stronger now. She's trying to communicate. Sure enough, fragments of images began to appear in their minds, not chaotic flashes this time, but clear, purposeful memories. They saw glimpses of Lyra's homeworld, a place of breathtaking beauty with towering crystalline structures and vibrant skies. They saw her people, peaceful and kind, working together in harmony, and they saw the destruction wrought by those who sought to exploit them, reducing their paradise to rubble. When the visions ended, the silence lingered. Even Holt looked shaken, his usual stoic demeanor cracked. "What was that?" one of his men asked, his voice trembling. "It's her story," Lila said softly, her eyes glistening with tears. "She's showing us who she is and why." "She needs our help," Victor nodded, lowering his weapon. "Well, that settles it. We're not handing her over to anyone." Holt hesitated, clearly torn. His duty as captain clashed with the undeniable humanity of the situation. Finally, he let out a frustrated sigh. "Fine, take her. But if she causes trouble, it's on your heads." Without another word, he signaled for his men to retreat. As they disappeared into the night, Victor turned to Lila and Ethan, offering a crook smile. "Guess you owe me one." Victor Kane and his group led Lila, Ethan, and Lyra to a hidden camp nestled deep in the desert. It was a ramshackle collection of tents, makeshift shelters, and scavenged equipment. But there was a sense of life here, something absent from the cold, sterile settlement they had left behind. Fires crackled in metal barrels, casting flickering light across the area, while people moved about, tending to tasks or sharing quiet conversations. Despite its rough appearance, the camp felt alive, a place where people worked together to survive. "This is home," Victor said as he guided them through the maze of structures. "Not much to look at, but it keeps us out of trouble." Layla glanced around, taking it all in. The people here were different from those in the settlement. Their clothes were patched and worn, their faces marked by hardship, but there was a warmth in their eyes that she hadn't seen before. They weren't afraid of Lyra, or at least they didn't show it. Instead, they watched her with curiosity, some even offering small smiles. Ethan, on the other hand, remained wary. He kept one hand on the crowbar slung over his shoulder, his sharp gaze scanning the crowd. "How do we know we can trust you?" he asked Victor, his tone blunt. Victor chuckled, unfazed by Ethan's suspicion. "You don't, but I'm guessing you'd rather take your chances with us than go back to Holt and his crew." "He's got a point," Lila said quietly, leaning closer to Ethan. "We're not exactly in a position to argue." Ethan frowned, but didn't respond. Instead, he focused on keeping Lyra close, his protective instincts kicking in. The alien girl seemed calmer now, her earlier fear replaced by cautious curiosity. She looked around, her shimmering skin reflecting the firelight, and reached out to touch a strand of fabric hanging from a nearby tent. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if she were trying to understand this strange new world. Victor noticed her interest and smiled. "She's welcome here. We've got rules, sure, but we're not going to lock her up or treat her like some kind of experiment. That's more than Holt would offer." Lila nodded gratefully. "Thank you for helping us." "Don't thank me yet," Victor replied, his expression turning serious. "There's still a lot we don't know about her and about what's coming next." Over the next few days, life in the camp settled into a fragile routine. Lila continued teaching Lyra basic words, using gestures and drawings to bridge the gap between their languages. Each day brought small victories. Lyra learned to say, "Thank you," mimicked the sound of laughter when someone told a joke, and even began pointing out objects around the camp, eager to practice. Her progress amazed everyone, especially Lila, who found herself growing more attached to the alien girl with each passing day. Ethan, meanwhile, spent most of his time exploring the camp, talking to Victor and his crew. He wasn't naturally trusting, but he couldn't deny that these people were different. They shared what little they had, worked together without complaint, and treated Lyra with kindness rather than fear. Still, Ethan kept his guard up, always, watching for signs of betrayal. If anyone tried to hurt Lyra or Lila, he would be ready. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Victor invited Lila and Ethan to join him by the largest fire. A group of scavengers sat around it, passing around bottles of homemade drink and sharing stories. The mood was relaxed, almost festive, but Victor's expression remained thoughtful. So, he began, addressing Lila and Ethan directly. Tell me more about our guest. What do you know about her? Lila hesitated, glancing at Lyra, who was sitting nearby, playing with a piece of string. Her name is Lyra. She's peaceful. Her people value cooperation and harmony. From what I've gathered, they were attacked, forced to flee their homeworld. She ended up here alone. Victor nodded slowly, absorbing the information. That tracks. Earth's colonial government doesn't exactly have a great track record when it comes to aliens. Most species either get exploited or wiped out. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. Why are you so interested? What's in it for you? Victor smirked, lighting a cigarette. Let's just say I've got my reasons. People like us, the ones who live on the fringes, we don't have much power. But if we could prove that humans and aliens can coexist, maybe things would change. Maybe we could inspire others to fight back against the system. You mean rebellion? Lila asked, her eyes widening. I mean hope, Victor corrected. Rebellion's a strong word. But yeah, if enough people see what's possible, they might start questioning the status quo. And that's dangerous for the people in charge anyway. Ethan shook his head, skeptical. Even if that's true, Lyra's just a kid. You can't put that kind of pressure on her. No one's asking her to lead a revolution, Victor replied firmly. But her story matters. If we can protect her, learn from her, maybe we can find a way to make things better for everyone. The conversation lingered in Lila's mind long after the fire died down. She lay awake that night, staring at the stars through a gap in the paw. Tent fabric. Lyra slept beside her, her breathing soft and steady. Lila couldn't help but wonder what the future held, not just for Lyra, but for all of them. Could Victor's plan work? Could they really change the way humans saw aliens and themselves? The next morning, Lyra woke early, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a sense of urgency. She tugged at Lila's sleeve, pulling her toward the edge of the camp. When they arrived, she pointed toward the horizon, her luminous eyes wide with alarm. What is it? Lila asked, following her gaze. At first, she saw nothing but empty desert. Then faintly, she heard the distant hum of engines. Ethan appeared moments later, his face grim. Trouble's coming. Sure enough, a convoy of vehicles approached, kicking up clouds of dust as they sped toward the camp. Captain Holt's voice crackled over a loudspeaker. This is your last warning. Hand over the alien, or we'll take her by force. Victor emerged from his tent, his expression hardening. Looks like Holt's not done with us yet. The scavengers scrambled into action, grabbing weapons and forming defensive lines. Lila clutched Lyra tightly, her heart pounding. What do we do? She whispered. We fight, Victor said simply. For her. For us. For everyone who deserves a better world. As the vehicles drew closer, Lyra stepped forward, her small frame glowing faintly in the sunlight. She raised her hands, and suddenly the air around them seemed to shimmer. The engine sputtered, stalling as if caught in an invisible grip. One by one, the vehicles came to a halt, their drivers confused and frustrated. Holt stepped out of the lit vehicle, his rifle raised. What's going on? He demanded, his voice tinged with panic. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with both strength and sadness. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out, and another wave of visions flooded the minds of everyone present. This time, the images were clearer than ever. Scenes of peace and destruction, hope and despair, unity and division. They showed not only Lyra's past, but also a possible future one where humans and aliens stood side by side, working together to build something better. When the visions faded, Holt lowered his weapon, his face pale. For the first time, he looked unsure, uncertain of his orders and the path he had chosen. Victor stepped forward, breaking the silence. It's over, Holt. Go back to your bosses and tell them the world's changing, whether they like it or not. Holt hesitated, then nodded sharply. Without another word, he climbed back into his vehicle, signaling for his team to retreat. As the convoy disappeared into the distance, the camp erupted into cheers. Lila hugged Lyra tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You showed them." Ethan stood nearby, shaking his head in disbelief. "Guess miracles do happen." Victor placed a hand on his shoulder, grinning. "Not miracles, just courage. And a little bit of hope." The victory was short-lived. While Holt's retreat had given them a reprieve, everyone in the camp knew it wouldn't last. The colonial government wasn't the kind to back down easily. If anything, their failure would only make them angrier and more determined to take Lyra by force. Victor gathered his crew around the largest fire that evening, his expression serious. "We've bought ourselves some time," he began, addressing the group. "But they'll be back, and next time, they won't come alone. We need to prepare." Ethan leaned against a nearby crate, arms crossed. "Prepare for what? A full-scale assault? We're outnumbered and outgunned." "Maybe," Victor admitted. "But we've got something they don't, an advantage they can't predict." Lila glanced at Lyra, who sat quietly beside her, her shimmering skin reflecting the flickering firelight. "You mean her powers?" Victor nodded. "Exactly. She's stronger than she looks. And if she can disable engines and send visions like that, there's no telling what else she's capable of." "But using her as a weapon isn't right," Lila protested, her voice firm. "She's not here to fight our battles. She's just a child." "I'm not saying we should turn her into some kind of soldier," Victor replied calmly. "But she's already proven she can protect herself and us. All I'm saying is we need to think smart. Use what we've got to level the playing field." Ethan frowned, clearly uneasy with the idea. "And what happens when they figure out how to counter her? What then?" "That's why we don't rely on her alone," Victor said, his tone steady. "We fortify the camp, set traps, and stay one step ahead. If we work together, we might actually stand a chance." The scavengers murmured among themselves, nodding in agreement. They weren't fighters by nature, but desperation bred determination. Over the next few days, the camp transformed. Trenches were dug, makeshift barriers erected, and crude weapons crafted from scraps. Even those who couldn't fight found ways to contribute, cooking meals, mending clothes, or keeping watch. Lyra watched it all with quiet fascination. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could sense the urgency in the air. Whenever someone passed her, they offered a smile or a pat on the shoulder, their gratitude evident despite the tension. Lila stayed close, teaching her new words and explaining the preparations as best she could. "They're trying to keep us safe," Lila told her one evening, pointing to a group of scavengers reinforcing a barrier. "They care about you, Lyra, about all of us." Lyra tilted her head, her luminous eyes thoughtful. Then slowly, she reached out and touched Lila's hand. "Safe," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. "Yes," Lila said, smiling. Safe. Despite their efforts, fear lingered in the camp. Nights were restless, with guards posted around the clock. Everyone knew Holt's return was inevitable, but no one knew when or how bad it would be. The waiting wore on them, testing their resolve. One night, Ethan approached Lila as she sat by the fire, staring into the flames. He looked tired, his usual swagger replaced by a rare vulnerability. "You really think this is worth it?" he asked, his voice low. "What do you mean?" Lila replied, glancing up at him. "All this." He gestured toward the camp, where scavengers were still working tirelessly. "Risking everything for one alien kid. Is it really worth it?" Lila hesitated, her gaze drifting to Lyra, who was curled up asleep nearby. "Yes," she said finally, "because she's not just an alien. She's proof that things can be different, that we don't have to live in fear and hatred. If we give up on her, we're giving up on ourselves." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Guess I can't argue with that. You don't have to believe me, Lila continued. Just don't let her down. None of us can afford to. For a moment, Ethan didn't respond. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Lila alone with her thoughts. The attack came without warning. It was early morning, the sky still dark with pre-dawn shadows, when the first explosion rocked the camp. Alarms blared as scavengers scrambled to their positions, grabbing weapons and shouting orders. The air filled with smoke and chaos as armored vehicles rolled in, their headlights cutting through the haze. Soldiers poured out, heavily armed and moving with precision. This is it! Victor yelled, rallying his people. Hold the line! Lila grabbed Lyra, pulling her behind a makeshift barricade. Her heart raced as gunfire echoed around them, the sharp crack of bullets punctuating the screams of the wounded. She hugged Lyra tightly, shielding her with her body. Stay close to me, she whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan appeared moments later, dragging a wounded scavenger to safety. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes burned with determination. We can't hold them off forever, he shouted over the noise. We need to fall back. No, Victor barked. If we retreat now, they'll overrun us. We hold our ground. Lyra suddenly stood, her small frame glowing brighter than ever. She raised her hands, and the ground beneath the attackers began to tremble. Soldiers stumbled, their vehicles swaying as if caught in an earthquake. One by one, they fell to their knees, clutching their heads as waves of visions flooded their minds, images of peace, destruction, hope, and despair. The attack faltered, confusion spreading among the ranks. Seizing the opportunity, Victor led a countercharge, his people firing wildly and throwing improvised grenades. The tide of the battle shifted, forcing the attackers to retreat. When the dust settled, the camp was battered but intact. Bodies lay scattered across the battlefield, both human and scavenger alike. Lila clung to Lyra, tears streaming down her face as she surveyed the damage. It's over, she whispered hoarsely. It's finally over. But Ethan shook his head, his expression grim. No, it's not. This was just the beginning. Later that day, Victor called everyone together for a meeting. His face was weary, but his voice carried authority. We held them off today, he said, addressing the group. But they'll regroup. And next time, they'll bring everything they've got. So what do we do? One scavenger asked, his voice tinged with fear. We leave, Victor replied. We take Lyra somewhere safe, a place they can't find her. Lila's heart sank. Where? There's nowhere left. There is, Victor said firmly. Her ship, or what's left of it. If we can repair it, we can get her off this planet. Back to her people. But how? Lila asked, her voice trembling. It's barely holding together. It's our only shot, Victor insisted. And maybe, just maybe, her people can help us too. Show us a better way. The scavengers exchanged uncertain glances, but no one argued. They all knew it was a long shot, but it was also their best chance. As the group dispersed, Layla knelt beside Lyra, taking her hands. You're going home, she said softly, forcing a smile despite the lump in her throat. Back to your family. Lyra looked at her, her luminous eyes filled with understanding and sadness. Lee. La, she whispered, reaching out to touch her cheek. Tears spilled down Lila's face as she pulled Lyra into a tight embrace. I'll miss you, she murmured, but you'll always have a place here with me. The journey to the crash site was long and grueling. The group traveled under the cover of darkness, avoiding open roads and sticking to hidden paths through the desert. Victor led the way, his scavenger instincts guiding them safely past dangers, both natural and man-made. Ethan carried most of the tools they need to repair the ship, while Lila stayed close to Lyra, shielding her from the biting wind and harsh terrain. Lyra walked silently, her small frame glowing faintly in the moonlight. She didn't complain or falter, even when the ground grew uneven or the air turned icy. Instead, she seemed focused, as if she understood the weight of what they were trying to do. Occasionally, she would reach out to touch Lila's hand, offering quiet reassurance that she was still there. As they neared the crash site, tension built within the group. They knew Holt's forces could be waiting for them, ready to ambush. But when they finally arrived, the area was eerily quiet. The wreckage lay where it had fallen, twisted metal glinting dully in the pale light. It looked worse than any of them remembered, half buried in sand, scorched by fire and battered by time. "This is it," Victor said, his voice low. "Let's get to work." The scavengers spread out, inspecting the remains of the ship. Some began clearing debris, while others examined the control panels and engines, searching for anything salvageable. Ethan worked tirelessly, his hands moving with practiced precision as he pieced together broken circuits and rewired damaged systems. Lila stayed by Lyra's side, helping her explore the remnants of her craft. Though much of it was unfamiliar, to her, Lyra seemed drawn to certain parts, touching them gently as if reconnecting with old memories. Hours passed, then days. Progress was slow, but hope remained alive. Each small success brought them closer to their goal, a working ship capable of leaving Arender. Lyra played a key role, using her telepathic abilities to guide the scavengers. When they struggled to understand alien technology, she sent images into their minds, showing them how things fit together. Her strength amazed everyone, especially Lila, who watched her with growing admiration. But not everything went smoothly. Supplies ran low, tempers flared, and exhaustion took its toll. One night, as they huddled around a small fire, Ethan voiced what many were thinking. "What happens after we fix the ship?" he asked, his tone heavy with doubt. "Even if we get her off this rock, will it matter? The people hunting her won't stop. They'll just keep coming." Victor sighed, poking at the fire with a stick. "Maybe, but maybe not. If her people are as advanced as she seems to be, they might have answers we don't, ways to fight back or at least ways to survive." "And what about us?" Ethan pressed. "We can't all go with her." "No," Victor admitted. "But she's given us something important, a reason to keep fighting. That's enough for now." Lila listened quietly, her gaze fixed on Lyra, who sat nearby staring up at the stars. She couldn't imagine saying goodbye to the alien girl who had come to mean so much to her. But deep down, she knew it was the right thing to do. Lyra belonged with her own kind, not trapped on a hostile planet surrounded by fear and hatred. Finally, after days of relentless effort, the ship was ready. The scavengers gathered around it, their faces etched with pride and sadness. It wasn't perfect, the hull was patched together with scraps, and the engine sputtered uncertainly, but it was functional. Enough to carry Lyra home. Victor stepped forward, placing a hand on Lila's shoulder. "It's time," he said gently. Lila nodded, swallowing hard. She knelt beside Lyra, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Your family will take care of you." Lyra hugged her back, her small arms surprisingly strong. Then, reaching out, she placed a hand on Lila's forehead. A rush of images flooded Lila's mind, scenes of beauty and wonder, of towering crystalline cities and endless skies filled with light. She saw Lyra's people, peaceful and wise, welcoming her with open arms. And she saw herself, standing tall and unafraid, leading others toward a brighter future. When the vision ended, tears streamed down Lila's face. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Lyra smiled softly, her luminous eyes filled with gratitude. La! Ethan approached next, his usual smirk replaced by an uncharacteristic seriousness. "Take care of yourself, kid," he said gruffly, ruffling her hair. "And don't let anyone push you around, not even your own people." Lyra nodded, her expression solemn. Then, without another word, she climbed aboard the ship, her movement steady and purposeful. As the hatch closed behind her, the engines roared to life, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The scavengers stepped back, watching as the ship lifted off, its battered frame rising slowly into the sky. For a moment, it hovered above them, casting a soft glow over the desert. Then, with a burst of speed, it shot upward, disappearing into the stars. Silence fell over the group as they stared at the empty horizon. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. But in that silence, there was also hope of fragile, flickering flame that refused to die. Weeks later, rumors began to spread throughout the settlement. Stories of the alien girl who had escaped, protected by humans labeled as outcasts and rebels. Some dismissed the tales as nonsense, but others listened, inspired by the idea of unity and defiance. Captain Holt tried to suppress the whispers, but they persisted, growing louder with each passing day. Lila returned to the clinic, her heart heavy but determined. She continued treating patients, speaking softly of compassion and understanding. Ethan resumed his scavenging, but he no longer did it alone. He shared his findings with those in need, earning a new reputation among the settlers. And Victor's crew expanded, drawing in others who believed in their cause. Though Lyra was gone, her presence lingered. In the hearts of those she had touched, she remained a symbol of hope, courage, and the belief that even in the darkest times, change was possible. And somewhere far away beyond the stars, Lyra looked back at the blue-green planet she had left behind. She thought of Lila, Ethan, and the others who had risked everything to save her. Her lips curved,